Okay, everybody, it is great to be with you tonight. And whenever you are viewing this, there's lots of information for you. This has been a great event put on by NACAP, and I think you've had a lot of great presentations. So we want to add another one to that list. And this is talking about studying at U.S. college universities and student services, which isn't something that you normally think about necessarily, but I think it's really important because as you're trying to make this college choice, how do you decide, about what's available and how important it is to you and what role it plays in your experience, in your college experience. So let's look at a few of the services that are available that you will probably be taking advantage of, and they're things that we actually encourage you to take advantage of. So student services in U.S. colleges really begin with admissions and go all the way through and past your graduation time. So we're going to look at some information, and we're not going to we could spend whole presentations on probably each one of these, but we're just going to spend one screen on each one of these. And we're going to talk about, what you might be going through right now, which is the application, the admissions process. Next summer or the summer before you start your enrollment, or just before the semester starts, you'll probably go through an orientation. So let's talk about that one. And then obviously you're going to have housing. Most of you will be living on campus housing. Some may be finding your own private housing, and that's fine too, depending on what the requirements of the college or university are. There's also academic advising, which is a crucial part of your experience. No matter which school you go to, you're going to have some academic advising, and it's kind of up to you as to how much you take advantage of that, but that's a really important part of your academic program. Then there's also international student advising, and obviously some of you might be TCKs or U.S. citizens abroad, and so you wouldn't necessarily be using international student advising. But if you're coming here on a student visa, you're going to be using international student advising. So we definitely want to talk about that aspect, because that's going to be really important to you while you're at your U.S. college or university as well. There's also something that really isn't talked about too much, and students don't necessarily want to know, and others to know that they're using this, but personal counseling is another thing that is really important. And so we're going to look at some of the reasons why someone might use personal counseling while they're in college. They're all very valid reasons. And that's why these offices exist, is because students can need, not always, they don't always need it, but they can sometimes need someone to talk to about certain issues. And so we want to talk about a few of those things. Then as we go on through our college experience, we get to not necessarily the last year, but this could even start from, and it does start from year one, career planning and placement. Our people are going to talk to you about this process all the way through. Most of these sessions are not mandatory. You don't have to do career planning and placement, but it's there for your benefit. And we want you to take advantage of the programming. We're going to talk about some of that. And then finally, we're even going to talk about the alumni office, because once you graduate and move on to graduate school or the job force, I think your parents probably hope it's one of those two things, then you will have the opportunity potentially to work with the alumni office on some different activities. So let's kind of go through these and see what we're going to talk about. So when we're talking about admissions, many of you are going through this process right now. In fact, maybe all of you are. Obviously, contacting the admissions office at the university where you're interested in, the multiple universities probably, and find out who works with international U.S. abroad students, who works with you through the admissions process. Probably there's going to be somebody designated in that office that specifically works with you. Like, I'm that person for Hope College. I work with all international students. I work with all U.S. abroad students. I work with all international students, even if they're already in the U.S. So anybody international, I work with them. These are people like myself are trained professionals on working with credentials, where we know the immigration regulations are most of us do. And if there's somebody that doesn't have that familiarity, they do have a connection with the international office where they'll make sure that they get answers for you if they don't have them. But we are very familiar typically with your educational systems, like wherever you go to school. And that's pretty important. I mean, we want to be very fair and accurate when we're evaluating your transcript and your credential, and when we're looking at information about your school and the educational system, whether it's an IB curriculum, a national curriculum, an AP curriculum, or US-based curriculum, whatever it might be, we want to give you a fair evaluation. So it's important to ask a lot of questions as you go through this process. That's why we're here. The more engaged you are in the process, the more interesting it is for everybody. I mean, we're here as a resource for you. So we want you to ask those questions. We want you to get those answers. And if we can't get them for you, there is somebody at our campus that we can refer to, because sometimes the questions get a little technical about something that isn't even admissions related, but maybe something related to campus services that we can find an answer for you. It's important to ask, and I didn't really put this in there, I talk about scholarships in the third bullet point, but it's really the same thing applies for admissions criteria. So find out what the admissions criteria are, what documents you need. I mean, go through all that. It should be on their website. I know it's on our website, but it should be on most websites. But feel free to ask the question if you can't find it, about what admissions criteria, what documents you need. And then for scholarships, what is available? What can you be considered for? What do you need to do to be considered for them? So all these are great questions to ask. It's okay to ask about scholarships. I think, please just realize that full scholarships are almost non-existent. There's very, very few full scholarships out there. I'll give you an example later of a special opportunity we have. Hopefully I'll remember to pop this in later, but it's a great opportunity, but even it is not a full scholarship. Those are, like I say, very rare. And even when they're offered, a school might offer like one or two, and they're not going to advertise it, because if they did, they would get flooded with applications. And so we want kids that want to be at our school because they have researched our school and want to be here, not because we might offer a scholarship. I mean, that's just a side benefit. It's important that you're going somewhere that you feel comfortable with, that you want to spend 4 years there, and you have to be able to pay the balance of the bill after the scholarship, so that you have a lot invested in this decision. So admissions, obviously, and the recruitment process is really important. As most of you imagine. Read all of the information you receive, especially after you've been admitted, because that information is very targeted and we're telling you very specific things. We're talking about very, very specific next steps related to housing, related to the deposit, related to class registration, related to orientation. Those are very important. And I have no idea, I did a misspell there at the bottom, and it should be watch deadlines. I have no idea what that Hobby Q got in there, but that should be watch deadlines. It's important because there are admissions deadlines. There are also sometimes scholarship deadlines. And so the later you wait, the more likely you're going to miss a deadline. So this is the time kids are applying. As I'm sure your counselor and maybe even your parents are telling you, get those applications out. In the US, we like to tell our kids to get them out by Halloween, which was October 31st. Some people use more like Thanksgiving, which is another US holiday, obviously, but that's the end of November. So there's different targets that some counselors have and that they tell their students about. But I encourage you to definitely apply before the holiday season in December, because then a lot of campuses are actually closed for a couple of weeks. So that's going to delay any kind of decision. So you want to get those things in relatively early, anytime now. Now, if you haven't done it already, now's a good time. And make sure when you go through applications that you're filling out all the questions, you're answering everything, and you're submitting all the documents. We will just go back and forth with you until all the documents are in, and we're not going to be able to make a decision again until all the documents are in. So we have kids that will send us 1 or 2 documents, say, send me my I-20. And we're like, no, you're not even admitted yet. We got to keep going through this process and get you admitted. So, or get you a decision. And it may be that you're not a good match for the school and you don't get admitted. That happens, unfortunately. So it's all about making the right match academically, financially, and any other aspect that's important to you. So that's a little bit or a lot about admissions. And again, we could talk more specifically about different types of schools, but I think this just gives you a view of admissions being an important part, obviously, of your interactions with the college or university. So let's go on. Let's move on to, let's say, now we're looking at next spring. And I want to make sure I didn't skip a page. I did not, sorry. And so next spring, sorry, let's say you're entering in 22. So the spring and the summer before you're going to enter the school, you're going to have a bunch of interactions with registration with maybe your academic advisor, which we'll talk about in a minute, and maybe the international office. But definitely you'll get some information about orientation. Housing is another one, and orientation. We'll talk about all of those different offices. But next in the progress of being admitted and then making a decision is orientation, which happens typically just before classes start in the fall. So international student orientation, as it says, is usually mandatory for international students, but it's quite often optional for TCKs. College and university staff, as well as current international students, are usually involved. It can be 3 days, 4 days, 5, up to 10 days usually. Like ours is a 10-day orientation. We actually do a parent orientation too. So parents that want to join, we have about half the time is designated that parents are going through some stuff at the same time the kids are. They don't necessarily have to stay for the full 10 days because we only have about 5 days of activities for them, but it does acclimate the parents as well to the services that we offer. So when the parents, when you students go home for the holidays and you say, but Mom, I can't find this office or that office, or I don't know how to do this, the parents know that those offices existed because we told them to. So they're going to support what we've been trying to tell you. So we feel that parents really get a lot out of that. The length does vary by the school, and there could be a cost for that orientation or maybe not, again, depending on the school. It does help familiarize you, though, with the campus, the faculty, the staff, and the surrounding community. You might be in a small town, like Hope College is in a small tourist town of 34,000 people. So when you arrive in August for our orientation, it's really busy because it's tourist time. There's a lot of people. They're getting in that last vacation time before school starts. So there's a lot of people in town. There's a lot of people on the beaches because we're very close to Lake Michigan. So it's a very exciting and fun time to be. We do a lot of picnics and different things during orientation to, again, let you see the social side of campus and the area as well. There may be some placement testing that happens during orientation, and that English, math, and foreign language are the common ones. There could be others potentially. You're going to take that time to meet with an advisor and register for class, and it really just allows you to feel more acclimated when the rest of the new students arrive. Kind of toward the end of the international student orientation, you'll probably join them for a 2 or 3 day all new student orientation. And it's a little bit easier because at least you feel a little more comfortable. You've got over the jet lag, you've moved into your dorm, you've potentially gotten used to your roommate if they're already there. And that may take more time than 10 days to get used to having a roommate. But we really do a good job, or we think we do, and campuses do, of making good roommate matches. And we'll talk about that when we talk about housing as well. So that's a little bit about orientation. Again, it varies in time. I would say almost all campuses have some sort of either specific orientation for international students, or they take part of some time out of the overall orientation and designate it for some international student activities, so that you can meet the other students, meet the international student staff, etc. So we've been talking about housing, but so we show you a little shot there of one of our dorm rooms actually at Hope. You'll sign up typically and pay housing in May or June after you've made your final commitment. Kind of the final commitment date for choosing a college. You can do it any time after you're admitted, but we usually ask for a commitment or an enrollment deposit by May 1. And then usually after you pay an enrollment deposit, that's what triggers some of the other things like housing paperwork, because we're not going to send you housing paperwork until we know you're going to come. So then there's usually, sometimes anyway, a housing deposit that has to happen. There's some paperwork and a housing deposit where they're going to ask you in the paperwork, questionnaire about helping them to match you up with a roommate. So what are your practices? What are your common practices? Do you get up early? Do you stay up late? Do you like, what kind of music do you like? I mean, there's all kinds of questions where we're trying to match you with students that are somewhat like you. We're not looking for a perfect match. That's just not going to happen. But we're looking for a lot of good qualities that will seem to be compatible. And you're going to have this room picture that I show you here on the screen. That's like a 2-person room. So it's a small room with 2 beds, 2 desks, 2 dressers, and closet space. And sometimes there's room for a a futon or a small chair or something in the room as well that some students will bring. And then many times, this is a very common setup for many campuses where it's the between one and four people in a room. It could be a suite style room where the bedrooms are separate from the living, so one living room and then a couple of bedrooms, or it could be just a room like you're seeing in the picture. And then it could also be a group bathroom, kind of a single sex bathroom down the hall, or it could be a suite, again, a suite style where the bathroom is in with the four bedrooms and the common area. Or like an apartment style dormitory or residence hall. So there's many different styles. You can look through the paperwork when you get it. You can ask questions. Sometimes they'll have specific dormitories for specific types of kids. So for example, we have what's called the Phelps Scholars, and the Phelps Scholars is it's like a cultural honors program, because they're really concentrating and they're looking at multicultural and international understanding. And so they go to museums, they go to different religious they go to different churches and other types of venues, and just to learn. This isn't the point of we're saying this is what you should do. We want you to be exposed to many different people through this experience and through the museums and other field trips. And then they take those students in Phelps Scholars, they take the same first year seminar and they live in the same dormitory together. So that's a situation where they've housed them together. And it may be that, all the engineering students are housed in a certain building because it's close to the engineering building, or it may be all the athletes of a certain sport go into a certain building because it's just convenient to have those athletes together. So there's different reasons why someone might be, assigned to a certain building. Now, the last point there I wanted to mention is if you have strong leadership skills, you could be hired potentially even as early as year 2, but more commonly in year 3 and year 4, to be a resident advisor, which means you're kind of going to be the leader, the student leader for a wing of the dormitory. And you might have, let's say 15, I'm just going to arbitrarily pick a number, 15 girls or guys on that floor who would look to you for leadership on things that happen on campus. The resident advisor is kind of the one that maintains the rules too of what it takes to live in that dormitory, but they're also a good source of support for you as well. So again, strong leadership skills, and there is some kind of compensation typically. So you might get a discount on room and board, or it might be totally free, or just kind of depends on the campus as to what that amount is that you're paid to have that leadership position. But we have international students who serve in those roles here at Hope, and so it's really common. A really important one, and I mentioned this earlier, is academic advising. This is another service that you're going to have as a U.S. college or university student. You'll have a professor assigned to you as a faculty advisor, and typically they're from the area of study that you indicated on your application. And if you indicated undecided, then they're just going to assign you to one. And then ultimately, when you decide what you want to study, it's very easy to change advisors to somebody that's in that field of study. They're going to work with you on class scheduling. They're going to give you academic advice as much as you want it, as much as you're willing to take it. They're going to really work with you all the way through your degree program, so all 4 years. And if you get to know them very well, I mean, there's also could be times when they might recommend you for an internship, or recommend you for, give you recommendations for graduate schools that they think you might be a good match for. And again, if they get to know you well, they might be willing to write a recommendation letter for you. And that can be very influential for any of these opportunities. In my mind, that's crucial, because I know at Hope, 93% of our students do experiential learning. So 93% do internships, practicums, research, or study abroad. And to do any of those things, a lot of times it takes kind of a recommendation letter. It takes somebody that knows you. And so knowing your faculty members, knowing your academic advisor is very important. And sometimes you do end up having your academic advisor for a class. It wouldn't be that surprising if that person is from your academic area. You very well might have them for a class too. Take advantage of the opportunities to meet with them and be prepared for those meetings. Obviously, you're not going to remember all this stuff, but if you remember some of the key points of this, and you'll see these things pop up again once you actually enter college. But I think these things we're talking about are a good preview of what you're going to encounter in your U.S. college experience. So academic services. Typically, an academic service office on campus will have sessions available all year for all levels of students. So this isn't something that you don't have to have a need for this. In other words, there is tutoring available. You don't have to necessarily need a tutor. You could say, I think this would really help me. Do I need it? Could I get by without it? Sure. But would this help me to meet with an upper class student for one session or two sessions to kind of get on track with the subject that I'm not familiar with? Yeah, I think that could be a very helpful thing. The Writing Center. For some of you, English is not your first language. So if it's not, then maybe you're not used to writing really volumes, like term papers in English. And if you're not, then I think going to the Writing Center and having somebody review your paper with you. This picture here is actually of our Writing Center. So you see a lot of students here, and there's actually upper class students at each table who are kind of going over the writing samples with the students and saying, let's look at this paragraph. How do you think this might be worded better? It's not a time when they're going to rewrite your paper for you. It's time when they're going to identify parts of your paper that they want you to look at again, because they're noticing something that's maybe a discrepancy, or they're noticing something just that could be done better. And they're telling you, hey, let's work on this section, or let's work on, your punctuation, or whatever it is, So Writing Center is a good example. There are small group sessions on different types of skills. There's just general workshops that can be open to very large groups too. So study skills can happen all the way through. How to take notes, how to get the most out of a lecture, how to even listen to a lecture. Like, what does it mean to be just lectured to? But also realize that in the U.S. system, our faculty expect you to participate. So what does it mean to participate in class? And what does it mean when a faculty member says 20% of your grade is based on participation? What does that mean? For some of you, you're coming from educational systems where you go to class, you listen to the professor, and you leave. And you may never have contact with your professors outside of that. That's very much not what you encounter in the US. Especially it's true at schools like the size of Hope, where we're about 3,000 students with a 12-to-1 student-teacher ratio. So you're really going to get some intense experience. And I would say many of the schools that you maybe hopefully have visited during this fair time or seen in these presentations are very similar to Hope in the sense that there's a lot of student-faculty interaction. And so they have expectations of you. Now, they're used to US students. Not all faculty, not all schools have large international populations. So it's important that you find out and get the help and ask questions when you're on the campus so that you can better understand the US system when you're in the classroom. What does it mean to be a good student in the classroom, an interactive student? So the study skills workshops, time management workshops. Some of you are not used to, won't be used to the amount of activities that are available for you to do. And the fact that you're only going to have maybe 4 classes or maybe 5 classes that, for a total of 15 hours a week. That's all. You have class for 15 hours. But the important thing that I always tell students, okay, you only have 15 hours of class, but we say for every hour in class, you could have up to 2 hours of homework, small group work, writing, everything involved in preparing for the classes. So now you've said, okay, I've got 15 hours of class. Now I've got 30 hours of prep. I'm up to 45 hours now. That's a full-time job. That's more than a full-time job. Then you probably want to have a social life, and you probably want to eat. And you probably want to sleep too, maybe not as much as you should, but you've got all those things that you need to do. So that's a very full-time schedule. So time management can be crucial. If you haven't really had to do that before, maybe some workshops on campus about what it means to manage your time would be really good for you. So those are a few academic related services. And I, by no means have found all of them. I picked some of the major ones that I wanted to mention. So let's talk about the international and the third country kid, or the TCKs, or the US abroad, anybody that kind of falls into that category. So any services that are related to this. This happens to show one of our newly arrived international student groups. Actually, it's from last year, but usually provided through the international office. And that office can be a really safe, comfortable locations where students can gather. You're going through the same type of experiences. It's a chance for you, whether you've been raised abroad as a U.S. citizen or whether you're actually international, you're going through the same types of experiences by coming back to the U.S. or coming to the U.S. So there's a lot of things you go through in this transition, and I think international students international offices provide a great location for you to talk with people, talk with other students, meet some of the other students that maybe you haven't met before, and meet current students too if you're new. So it's a nice location to be able to do that. Immigration advising for the international students. Now, how do you maintain immigration status? Immigration status, your status is, well, I hate to say this, your problem, right? You are in charge of your own immigration status. So what are your responsibilities related to that? What do you need to do? How do you maintain status? And that's something that the International Student Advisor will make sure that you're informed about. Ultimately, then it's up to you to make sure it happens. What does it mean to be able to, or can you work on campus, and how do you do that? Internships, how do you do those? Is it possible? And then even working after graduation, what does that look like? So the immigration advisor, that's part of his or her job, is to make sure that you're educated about these things and make sure that they tell you what you need to do and in what time frame. Ultimately, it's up to you to do it. Okay, all we can do is guide you and head you in the right direction. And then you need to take the ball and run and make sure that it gets turned in time, make sure you do everything in the right schedule. And then the international office, also does social programming. We just did this last weekend, our big international night called Images. And it's like 2 to 3 hours of performances from our students, and also the American students' friends that they've gotten involved will even perform with them, and there's songs and dances. And so every campus, well, not every, but most campuses have something like that, an international night, a celebration. They might have a food festival or even more than one throughout the year of different ethnic foods where you have the opportunity to prepare something from your country. Our food service on our campus has even consulted with our international students, because we have this global section of our cafeteria, and they've consulted with the international students occasionally. And how do we make this dish, or how do we make that dish? We'd like to serve that. Or they'll ask them, is there something you'd like to see in the cafeteria that you haven't seen before? And how can we do that? And so I think especially at small campuses, that's a little bit easier because you don't have these massive cafeterias. It's probably a little more difficult to do it at a really large campus. So the social programming from orientation all the way through different activities, coffee hours, and different things are, again, usually offered by the international office, but they can be a really important part of your experience. So let's talk a little bit about that personal counseling that I mentioned earlier. Okay, the college experience can be pretty rough at times. There's no question. You're going to be away from home many times, thousands of miles away, sometimes not quite that far, depending where you're coming from. And you may not have any family nearby. You may know no one. And then on the other hand, you may be fortunate to be coming to the college with another student from your school. And so you know somebody, or you know somebody that started at the school the year before, and that gives you a connection, and that's great. But many of you will be coming to a school where you don't know anybody. You're going to make new friends. That causes a bit of anxiety. Even for the most social person, it's still, there's a lot of stress when you arrive. Like, how is this going to go? Am I going to like it? Am I going to like my roommate? Are my classes going to be tough? Are my teachers going to talk to me? I mean, these are all things that you just think about. So homesickness is a reality. Homesickness is something that almost every student experiences, and sometimes more than once. And it's our job to help you through that and make sure you realize it's okay to feel the way you feel, and to sometimes, it goes in waves, and you will just not understand why we do the way we do things in the U.S. It just doesn't make sense. And you're right, half the time it doesn't. So we try to, again, tell you it's okay. Things will be better, and what can we do to help? And sometimes it's just leave you alone, and sometimes it's getting you into the fold of things and getting you with your friends and getting your mind off the fact that you're not home. And you'll start to get busy again and it will kind of go away. That's typically what happens anyway. So depression and anxiety are a real thing. And we want students to know there's help for that. We want to know there's support. There's people you can talk to. There's things that we can do to help relieve some of that stress that's involved in these experiences you're having. There's psychological, emotional support. There's counselors available to talk to you if you need it. There's individual sessions, and these things are all confidential. Nobody knows that you're going to the counseling center and why you're going there. It's none of their business. And all the records are confidential. So we just want students, when during orientation, we're going to take you around to all these offices so you know where they are. And we're going to try to really empower you to make use of the services when you need them. They're not always needed, and that's fine, but we want you to know where things are in case you do need them. So let's move on to something that is a little more positive, and that's career planning and placement. So this happens right away. This isn't something that you wait. I think I mentioned this earlier on. This isn't something that's just a final year type thing. We start talking about career planning and placement from year one. And it's even as simple as, what are you going to major in? And if you don't know already, and many students do change their major. So that's, I would say the average US student, the average college student, let's put it that way, will change the major 2 to 3 times in the first 2 years. Sometimes it's a simple change from accounting to business, but other times it's a major change from education to biology, or something like that. I mean, some total change, and that's okay. The ultimate goal is that you're studying something that you want to study to come to an end result of getting into a certain career. Like, how do you get there? And that's what some career planning and placement and your academic advisor helps you to decide. Here's your end goal. How do we get you there? And you might be surprised that there's many different ways to get to an end goal. There isn't always only one path to get to medical school, for example, or to get to law school, or to get to, some are more cut and dry. Like if you want to be a biological researcher, yeah, you're going to major in biology. I mean, you're not going to major in English if you want to be a biological a researcher. But if you want to go to law school, you might be an English major. You might be could be a biology major. You could be a business major. I mean, there's all kinds of different majors. And even medical school, there are English majors that go to medical school. But the thing is, if you're trying to go to a graduate school that is not exactly related to your major, your advisor will say, okay, that's fine if you want to major in this, but you're going to have to take these other courses to augment, to add to your current program, or you're not going to be prepared to get into that graduate program. And they want to see these preparatory classes, or they're not even going to consider you. So it's okay to have a kind of a different major, but that's the importance of working with the people on campus, your advisors and the career planning and placement, to help make those decisions. We work with you on career planning, just like I was just saying. What is it that you want to do? How much ahead do you need to kind of prepare for that? And what do you need to do? Internships and job interview workshops. We have etiquette dinners. We have mock interviews. We have test prep. We even have had sessions on, okay, if you get told you're going to go to a job interview on the golf course, what does that look like? Job interviews happen all the time. And lately it's been, what do virtual interviews look like? And what's the appropriate attire, the appropriate way to act? How much are you supposed to use your hands? My hands are all over the place. I'm not even Italian, but my hands are all over the place. And so there's different cultures where we tend to, just naturally use our hands more. And so is that okay? Or are you kind of supposed to be a little more subdued in an interview as opposed to a presentation like I'm doing? And so there's also on-campus and possibly even off-campus interviews that could happen. In fact, they do happen, but on-campus definitely, off-campus sometimes. Like sometimes we'll take students to Chicago for Chicago interviews with alumni that we have working at companies in Chicago, for example. So those happen typically. Well, for internships, they could happen pretty much anytime. But for jobs after you're going to graduate, then those are going to happen in the second semester, or the semester you're going to graduate, basically, because those jobs would need to start obviously right when you're done. Okay, so that's a little bit about career planning. There's much more to it, but these are some of the main things. Oh, I should say the first bullet point is choosing a major. You might have a major, a double major, a major minor combination. Many students have, well, they have to have one major. Many students either have two majors or they have a major and a minor. And a minor just means it's less classes to complete a minor. So you might have 12 classes to complete a major. You might only have 8 classes to complete a minor. Myself, when I was in college many years ago, I did elementary education with a minor in, with a teachable major, in Spanish and social science group major. So being a teacher, you could kind of group things together because you're going to teach all the subjects I was elementary education. But and then along those lines, I've never taught. So, okay, so that's the benefits of a liberal arts education. You go to liberal arts schools and you gain a lot of these experiences that are going to come out when you do these interviews. So the people relation skills, the communication skills, the ability to kind of understand people, those things are going to come out when you do interviews. And so you're not really always committed to the major because sometimes it's really the career, and sometimes you don't even think about lining up, what majors are possible. You don't even know maybe at this point. Just one really quick story. There's a student that I was working with and she was a fantastic artist. She could draw like you wouldn't believe. They were incredible drawings, but she was also a very incredible scientist. She wanted to draw. Parents said, you really need to go into science. You're not going to make money drawing, which very well could have been the case. But so she said, I want to do them both. What do I do? And we talked with her and we said, how about medical illustration? She's drawing science stuff, so she's combining the best of both worlds there. So that's something she had never thought about. And probably most people wouldn't think about that, but that's a real career. And so, there are careers out there where you can combine things that you really enjoy doing. So finally, alumni activities. So when you graduate, the college will likely reach out to you and we'll try to engage you in different activities that they might be doing. They might have, in your country, they might have local dinners, or even within the US, local dinners, receptions. Admissions might reach out and say, hey, would you be willing to help us at a US university fair that's going to be in your city? Or would you be willing to come to a dinner or reception and speak about your experience at our school as an alumnus? And then maybe sometimes even you'd be somebody that would call local applicants to say, hey, I understand you're looking at Hope College or whatever the college might be. And let me tell you a little bit about my experience. And do you have any questions? So it doesn't have to be a super lengthy conversation, but it kind of gives them a connection point with somebody locally. And it gives them, they recognize that, oh, there are alums here that have gone to this school. And I didn't realize that. So it's also the opportunity sometimes to meet with or interview like graduates that are coming back home that might be, trying to get a job or that type of thing. So these are just a few activities. I did promise you that I would tell you about one thing at Hope College, and I want to just take one moment to do that, or 2 moments. And that's and it's kind of related to alumni, so I wanted to mention it. But we have a program called Hope Forward, and Hope Forward is a new scholarship. It's a full tuition scholarship, and 20 students per year are selected currently to come to Hope tuition free. It's a secondary application process, so you have to be admitted first by the end of December, and then you would be invited at that point to apply to Hope Forward. There's a separate application, separate essay. 20 students are selected worldwide at this point. I hope that number grows, but for right now, it's 20 a year. The concept is you're gonna come tuition free. But as an alumnus, when you graduate, we're going to ask you to contribute back to Hope College on an annual basis. No specific amount of money. You decide what you can give, but we do ask you to give back to the college after you graduate. So that's just kind of a unique opportunity. It's a very big scholarship. But it is something that's very highly competitive, but it's certainly related to alumni because that's what you would be at the time when you'd be contributing back. So that's a little bit about programs at the U.S. colleges and universities. My contact information is here on the screen. I certainly welcome you to reach out with any kind of questions. It doesn't have to be about Hope College. It can be just about the college experience in general, and I would be happy to help. So I thank you for joining us or viewing this presentation. I hope you've gotten some great information from all the other presentations as well, and good luck with your college search.
Thank you, Jim. This has been a really good overview of the many ways that students are supported when they come to any of our Christian colleges across the North American continent. I want to especially thank you for adding personal counseling to that offering. It is something that's offered everywhere. It's something that is, I think, a growing need for a lot of our students now going on to campus. It's not just about leaving home, but it's about basically returning to in-class learning. We have a generation of students or a class of students here this year that, for depending on where they're from, may have not had in-person instruction for maybe even 2 years, and it's a huge adjustment added on top of, how do you go back to the lecture format, the discussion format in person, the time management skills that's required, in addition to dealing with homesickness and change in academic expectations and all the things. And so I want to thank you for adding that, because that is one of the things that I think just gets overlooked or underestimated maybe, and I think as a parent, we really want to know that that's available if the need arises, and it could be something as little as just handling some stress or some anxiety, and certainly up from there.
Yeah, and I think great points. And I think one thing that to add to that is we really encourage our students to continue to do those things that they find stress relieving. In other words, some students are into the fine arts. Continue with your interest in the fine arts. Do it, be in the orchestra, do dance, do if it's physical activity, do sports just in intramurals. If you're not a varsity athlete, do intramurals, do yoga, do some kind of fitness. Some people just find that that's a great stress relief. And so we want you to continue to do that. If getting involved in clubs and organizations is what, although it can certainly cause stress if you get over involved, but it could also be a stress relief because you have all the academics. And so, get involved in things that look interesting. And one thing that I really forgot, and this is a big omission on my part in my services, and that's your faith-based counseling and faith-based activities on campus. I can't believe that. And the picture, the chapel is right on the picture right here. That's what said, oh, I forgot a screen for it. But I'd be remiss if I didn't say, most of us have chapel on campus. We're in a situation, and schools do this differently, but we have chapel 3 times a week, but it is not mandatory, but it's 10:30 to 10:50, 3 times a week. And I can tell you that even though it's not mandatory, over 1,000 students out of a third of our campus is at chapel every time we have it, even though it's not required. That chapel is packed, which is phenomenal. If the faith, which for most of you it is an important part of your life, whatever level that means, whatever level of importance it holds for you, take advantage of the pastoral services on the campus. We have a brand new ministerial center. We have the chapel, but we have a new ministerial center that's in the center of campus, very visibly located. There's a small library, and there's plenty of meeting space. The pastoral staff is there. We have multiple different staff. We have a non-denominational staff, but we also have a Catholic priest who is on campus as well. And so we want to make sure, and then we also make sure that students are connected with local churches. They're welcome, obviously, to all the activities on campus, including the faith-based clubs as well. But if they would rather be in a church that is in the community, we make sure they get connected with the community as well. So look to the faith-based services on campus as another resource for you in whatever way you might need it. Let the campus walk along with you and provide you that guidance, provide you that assistance, but also they're really encouraging you to walk your own path and make mistakes and learn from the mistakes and grow. I mean, that's what college is all about.
Yeah, I think it's important for any parents, especially watching this, but certainly students as well, that everyone wants to see them succeed. no one wants to see failure. No one wants to see, struggles. No one wants that to happen, and you've done a great job outlining all the different ways and all the different touch points and all the different offices, basically, that are all there for the common goal of letting students succeed at any institution, but obviously you're specifically as Hope. But I just think that that's a thing to remember, that no one wants no one's trying to, trip you up, or, everybody has that shared goal. And again, you've done a really great job outlining all the different ways most of our schools go about, lining up for that success to happen.
Yeah, thank you so much for the opportunity. Thanks to all of you for viewing the presentation out there. And I look forward to talking to you if Hope is of interest, or even if you just have general questions. I hope you'll reach out.
Thank you so much, Jim. Have a great evening.